I heard I knew it more times than I can count. Not whispered, not implied, spoken with frustration and anger. Said like they were keeping score. It's like they weren't interested in the truth unless they were right about who I was. Whenever something went wrong, if I was even remotely connected, there it was. I knew it. I knew you'd do this. You always do this. It didn't matter if I caused it or not. It was like they were waiting for me to fail just so they could be right. And when that kind of message comes from people close to you, it doesn't just sting, it settles in. It becomes part of how you see yourself. But here's the truth, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I still do. I've had messy moments, but I've also gotten sober. I've healed. I've grown. And if I can do that, I know anyone can. When you grow up hearing doubt, it doesn't just stay outside of you, it seeps in. It becomes the voice inside your head. And in addiction, that voice is one of the hardest things to keep quiet. In phase one, what I like to call my fall, I was in survival mode. I numbed, I lashed out. I tried to make all my negative thoughts and feelings disappear. But every time I tried to rise, I'd hear it again. I knew it. Not because I was failing every time, but because someone else had already decided I would. And that's why this episode matters. Because if you ever felt like someone was just out there waiting for you to mess up, or that your mistakes were proof, you're not alone and you're not broken. You're just human and you deserve to rewrite your story. I was the youngest of 6, not just the baby, but the accident. My mama was 40 when she had me. One of my sisters, the golden child. Me, the chaos, the wild one, the one they had to watch. Also known as the holy terror. I've been called a lot of things. Too loud, too much, too emotional. And for a long time, I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't trying to cause the chaos. I was just trying to exist in a space that didn't know how to hold me. I had reactions, yes. I had pain, but I also had heart. And now, as a parent, I carry that heart into how I raise my daughter. I want her to know she doesn't have to shrink to be accepted. That she can be bold, different, and still deeply loved. I'm rewriting the story, not just for me, but for her and anyone else who's been in similar shoes. And when you're constantly treated like the problem, it's easy to lose sight of your truth. Not because you're unstable, but because you're surviving in a world that keeps misreading your strength. I wasn't just trying to be heard. I was trying to exist in a space that didn't want me as I was. Remember my dad, the Cajun, Acunas? Well, unless you understand that culture, you probably don't appreciate it. You more likely judge it. Well, that's what happened to us. My niece's father didn't just belong to the country club. He owned it. The golf course, the prestige, the power. And with that came judgment. He looked at me and my daddy like we didn't belong. I'll never forget the year when I was little. I wasn't invited to my niece's birthday party. We're 3 months apart. Not just because of anything I did, just because of how they saw us, how they saw my daddy. That kind of exclusion doesn't just sting, it settles in your bones. It tells you that you're not welcome, that you're not enough. And years later, that same energy showed up again. It was a different setting, same message though. We were at the beach. Me, my mom, my daughter, my niece, the one I'm referring to, my sister, and her other kid. Well, my niece's father, same one, I just happened to be there that same week. And once again, my family expected me to shrink. Turn down the music. Watch what I say. Don't be too much. But I've never been one to shrink. I've always refused to water myself down just to make others comfortable. And that refusal, it cost me. They sent me home. My own mom bought that flight, and I left alone. My daughter, she stayed behind. Back then, I didn't have the emotional tools I have now. Tools like pausing before reacting, like calling someone instead of spiraling, like asking myself, is this about me or about their discomfort? These tools, they didn't come easy. They came after showing up even when I didn't want to, from listening and learning and failing and going forward. But back then, I exploded. I'm not proud of how I handled it, but I am proud that I didn't abandon myself. That moment didn't just hurt, it clarified something. I was too much for their world and not enough for their approval. Well, I've heard it for years. You're going to end up just like your dad. But the way they said it, like it was a threat, I didn't take it that way. My daddy, he had a disease. You know what? The same one I've got, alcoholism. But you know what? I saw his heart and I loved my daddy's heart. He passed away 3 months after I got sober. That loss cracked me open. Even now, when someone says, that's something your daddy would do, they mean it as an insult. But I hear it as a reminder of where I come from, of the fight that lives in my blood. It's not just the judgment, it's how my ideas have been treated. I share something that I'm excited about, and I get hit with, yeah, right, or here she goes again, like they're already betting on me to fail. Sometimes it feels like they're not just doubting me, they're trying to knock me off the track. There have been moments where I poured myself into something only to have it taken away or copied by people I care about, not always intentionally. Regardless, it still hurt. In my previous workplace, I've been underestimated because of how I look, how I speak, or even in my role. I've had ideas dismissed, credit taken, and been blamed for so many things I didn't do. But I learned to speak up, document everything, and advocate for myself and others. And in doing so, I found allies and built resilience. I'll never forget the day one of my team members were chased into the ER lobby by a nurse, yelled at in front of everyone. Who are you? You're nobody. You're just registration. All he did was speak up for a patient. That moment wasn't just unprofessional, it was humiliating. It was loud and in public, and it was a clear reminder of how people in certain positions are seen, not as advocates or professionals, but as less than. And it set me off, not because I'm reactive, even though that can be true, but because I've lived that kind of dismissal. I've seen what it does to people, and I wasn't about to let it slide. See, he started to believe it, not because it was true, but because he'd been treated like that a bunch of his life. That kind of message doesn't just hurt, it wears you down. And I wasn't going to let that moment pass without calling it what it was: disrespect and dehumanization. And everything recovery teaches us to rise above. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is remind someone you're not invisible. You're not less than. You are important, and I love you. My journey with alcoholism was one of the hardest chapters of my life. The stigma was real, especially within my own family and even among some of the healthcare professionals I worked alongside. But it wasn't until I got sober that I truly saw it, because with clarity sometimes comes heartbreak. I started noticing how people like me who are still struggling and how they were being treated. You see, I'm still an alcoholic, and I could pick up any day if I stopped living the principles and doing the work. That's why it hit so hard. I saw how those still in the storm were looked at, judged, dismissed. It broke me, not just because I had lived it, but because I wasn't being treated that way anymore. I had the privilege of being in recovery, of looking stable, of being seen as safe. But what about the ones who hadn't made it yet? What about the ones still fighting to survive? They were being treated like they didn't matter, and they still do sometimes. And that still doesn't sit right with me, because I know the truth. We are all equals. Struggle doesn't make you less. Pain doesn't make you disposable. And no one deserves to be treated like they're invisible or worthless just because they haven't found their way out yet. That anger became my fuel, and heartbreak some of my purpose. And now I always speak up, and not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been judged for being in the middle of their fight. Recovery taught me that shame doesn't define me, that healing is possible, that love can be louder than judgment. It didn't erase the past or make me perfect, but it gave me some tools, some real tools. And it gave me people who didn't just talk about the healing, they lived it. One of the most powerful questions I learned to ask was, do I really believe this? And when I looked close, I saw a lot of what I carried wasn't mine. It was inherited, absorbed, passed down like shame, wrapped in tradition. Just because something's familiar doesn't mean it's truth. So I started stripping it back. Not perfectly, but piece by piece. I also learned to sit with discomfort, to name my feelings without judging them, to stop chasing validation and start building some self trust. Because recovery isn't just about obtaining sobriety, it's about learning how to live, feel, respond, be present and positive. Here's what helped me: working the steps, showing up to meetings even when I didn't want to, listening to people who had walked the path before me, getting honest with the sponsor, putting AA principles into all my affairs, and letting my higher power, who I know as God, well, that's been life changing. I'm not here to tell anyone what their higher power should be, but for me, it's God. I believe that even if others call it something different, it's still the same loving presence. Rebuilding my relationship with God has been one of the hardest and most healing parts of my journey. But I want you to know, there was a time in my life where I didn't want nothing to do with Him or anyone else's perception of Him. To me, it felt like He didn't want me. It felt like He made that clear years ago. So trusting and speaking with my higher power has been one of the most difficult parts of my recovery. It's taken time, pain, and a lot of unlearning. And I'll dive deeper into that in a future episode. Recovery gave me back my voice. and I use it now. Not to prove anything-ish, but to live true. I stand up for what I believe in. To me, right is right and wrong is wrong. I get to walk that walk. No longer defined by their doubt, no longer controlled by their fear, and fully rooted in the truth I reclaimed. If you've ever felt like someone was waiting for you to fail, not because of who you are, but because of who they decided you were, then you know how heavy that kind of judgment can feel. Recovery taught me this: you don't have to carry their story anymore. You get to write your own. You get to choose what you believe about yourself now, not based on their doubt, but based on your healing, your truth, and your voice. So ask yourself, whose story have I been living? And what would happen if I let it go? You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to shrink to be accepted. And you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You just have to be honest with yourself, with your healing, and with your truth. Take a breath. Take a moment. Ask yourself, what do I want to believe about myself now? You are not the labels that they gave you. You are not the silence they used to dismiss you. You are not the chaos they feared. You are the truth they overlooked. You are the strength they didn't understand. You are the story they could not rewrite. And that's why it's yours to tell. You don't owe anyone your silence. So speak, try, fall, get back up. Because their doubt doesn't define you. And guess what? It never did. If this episode spoke to you, take a moment to journal. Write down one belief you're ready to release and one truth you're ready to claim. You're not alone in this. You're not too much. You're not less than. You are just enough. Guess what? You always have been. If you're sitting with all of this, feeling seen, but also wondering, okay, what now? Well, I want to take a moment to speak directly to that. Because healing isn't just about reflection. It's also about action. And I know sometimes that next step feels scary. So let's talk about it. If you're listening and thinking, I want to get help, but I don't know where to start, please hear this. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need one moment of courage. One moment of courage. And that moment, it can be right now. Here are a few steps you can take today. Call someone safe, a friend, a sponsor, a helpline. You don't have to explain everything. Just say, I need support. Look up a local meeting, AA, NA, Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, whatever fits your spirit. Just showing up is enough. Text a crisis line. You can text hello to 741-741 to connect with a trained crisis counselor. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, dial 988 anytime. Someone will listen without any judgment. Reach out to NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. They offer free support and education at NAMI.org. Write it down. Sometimes the first step is just putting your truth on paper. Say it out loud, even if it's to yourself. I want to heal and I deserve to. You are not alone. There are people and a higher power ready to walk with you. Not because you're broken, but because you're brave enough to begin. And because we all have something in common. Pain, hope, healing, and the need to be seen. You're not the only one who's felt this way, and that means you're never walking alone down this road. Join me next week for episode 3. When no one believes in you, believe anyway. So until next time, keep rising, keep healing, keep reclaiming your truth. And remember, this is our Muddy Magnolia Rebellion, and I'm honored to walk with you. Until next time.